As parents, we have dreams and expectations for our children. Some of these will become true, and others have to adjust to the realities of life. Aside from all the differences of our aspirations as parents, though, there's one thing that we all face: the practicalities in educating our children. In this short presentation, I'm going to outline some of the basic issues involved in parenting. Alongside this, I will describe a perspective provided by the science of behaviour. This is me and my daughter Sarah, shortly after she was born. Like all new parents, I felt a mixture of awe and responsibility with this little bundle in my arms. As a first-time parent, I did not know what to expect, and at the most basic level, I was hoping simply that she would grow up to become a happy, healthy adult and live a life that was good, a life well spent. I hoped she would contribute to the world in a meaningful and constructive way, that she would love and be loved, find friends, and do a job that she enjoyed. Maybe she would start her own family one day. That would be nice, but not necessary. Importantly for me, I hoped that one day she would be able to look back on her life with happy memories. During the early months, I watched her learn so many things that she takes for granted now. She learned to sit and crawl and feed herself, even if that was quite messy to start with. She learned to walk and talk, first in syllables, then words, then sentences. She learned to use the toilet and say please and thank you. She learned to ask for things she wanted and learned to make decisions, first small ones, like which socks to wear, then bigger ones, like what jam to put on her toast. Nursery and then school. Oh my, that was a totally new experience, not only for her but also for me. There she was, coming home with new expressions, not all of them nice, and new things that she had made while I was not with her. Strange feeling to let go of your baby when she was still so little. At first, she had been put in a different class from her nursery mates. She hated school. Then she was moved to the class with her mates. She loved school. Friendships are so important. Here she was, able to make friends as I had hoped she would when she was first born. She never looked back. She loved the new things she learned: reading, writing, math. Well, math, that was a particular favourite. She learned Irish dancing and how to play the drums. She learned to glue things together and cut things apart. She learned to argue her case and lead her group in a project. Then, when her little brother joined the school, she learned to stand up to kids who bullied him. Then came big school. She paved the way through relationships with friends and teachers, and for the younger ones, it was relatively easy after that. Leaving home to go to uni. Was she well enough prepared to live independently? How about the practical stuff like cooking, food shopping, cleaning her room, washing her clothes, keeping time to attend the lectures, travel to and from town to campus, flying home alone? More importantly, how about the social stuff like making brand new friends, dealing with loneliness at times and fear of the unknown? She was far away for months at a time. Of course, nowadays with the internet and mobile phones, it's easier than when I went to college, but still. The distance, the remoteness, the hours on Skype could not compensate for the direct contact or the hugs. But there she was. She did all that stuff. She was well and truly able to live on her own, not starve, not get lost. At least if she did, she was able to work out how to get back, make some new friends, passed her exams, at least most of them, first time. She came home in one piece. What a relief. She was a happy, healthy adult, able to make friends, find a loving and lovely partner, and there goes another whole story. Now she's married and follows her dreams in a caring profession. She's contributing to the world in a meaningful and constructive way. They got a house and a puppy, no kids yet. Most of all, they got each other. They come to visit, that's great. But she's all grown up now and doesn't need us like before. That short vignette of my daughter's life was painted from the perspective of me as her mother. Of course, words can never really capture my feeling of love and pride I have for her, for all my children. These feelings run deep through my very being. When I eventually move on from my time here on planet Earth, I know my love will survive through my children and the people whose lives they touch. Of course, teaching her all the things she needed to learn during her childhood did not mean that we wanted her to be a different person, or did it? Some people argue that teaching new skills means that you are not accepting the person she was before she learned these skills. Did teaching her these skills mean that we did not accept who she was? Or did it mean loving her enough to make the effort to teach her? The answer is revealed when I recount the story again. This time, I will tell it from another side of me, the parallel perspective of a scientist, a behavior analyst. There's no competition between these two perspectives, the mother and the scientist. They live happily side by side. They're two sides of the same coin. As a scientist, I have learned to see things in a way that is very different to a mother's view. I have learned to use a language that is much more clearly defined. Some call it a jargon. This language allows me to express an additional layer of understanding of what it means to be a parent, and I want to share with you the benefits it provides. But I hesitate, and this hesitation is born out of my appreciation of the difficulties in communicating a scientific perspective to others. The word itself, science, often conjures up all sorts of images, like people in white coats or test tubes, to name just two. But I want to avoid provoking these images, so bear with me as I try to convey the complexities of talking about a different perspective on life and on living. I will look back at my daughter's path in life and show how a science of behavior contributes to an understanding of this path for her. A scientific perspective allows me to analyze what happened to my child, that small little creature she was when she was born, what happened to allow her to grow into the lovely woman she has become. It may not come as a surprise that some of the things that happened to her in the past 20-odd years were carefully planned, and on the other hand, some occurred more by accident. My daughter was not an experiment, not a toy to be played with in some sinister way, but the analysis of all her experiences shows that they ultimately created the lens through which she views her world. To know this is to be in tune with the responsibility that comes with being a parent. Like any parent, you have to walk a fine line between watching your child gather their own life experiences, freed from the influences of a controlling parent, while at the same time knowing when your responsibility is called upon to guide her away from experiences that might harm her. Metaphorically, you are charged with the task of giving her roots when she is young and giving her wings as she grows to help her navigate life more effectively. For example, after being nursed as a young baby, she had to learn how to eat solids. Teaching her to eat by herself was largely deliberately arranged. She was put in a high chair, and small bits of food were placed in front of her on the table. Of course, I made sure that the table was clean and that the food was appropriate and would not cause her to choke. At first, she responded by playing with the food, smearing it all around the table. Then, by chance, a little bit of the food ended up in her mouth. She started picking up the food with her fingers more deliberately and aimed for her mouth and so on. You have all seen the pictures of the resulting mess kids make. We repeated this exercise many times every day, and eventually she got better at feeding herself until she learned to use a spoon and later a fork, and now the adult can feed herself without messing up her makeup. The scientist in me recognizes that what actually unfolded were the consequences of a shaping procedure. Another example of what she had to learn were her social skills. When she was really young, we carefully taught her that sharing and negotiating are good things to do. We made sure that there were nice consequences when she shared toys with her little brother or when she offered some of her sweets to a friend. We practiced negotiating skills if she wanted something or if she wanted us to change our minds about a decision we had taken. So little by little she learned many of the skills that would help her navigate the world that would place many demands on her. So far, what I've said seems only just a little more distant from my opening description of the relationship with my child. Let's now take it up a gear, for there is more detail required to get across the perspective of a scientist. In some respects, the challenge I have set myself here is a bit like giving a running dialogue on the perspective of someone who can ride a bicycle. You can ride a bicycle without needing to talk about it, how you do it. But if you want to try and talk about it, then the words themselves will not give you the skills to ride the bicycle, but they might give you an understanding of the complexity involved in acquiring the skill. In many respects, shifting perspective involves a focus on the use of language. Regarding the words I used when talking about my daughter, I recognize that all of the words used, terms like happiness, love, friendship, satisfaction, memories, are only meaningful up to a point. They get across something very general. In truth, though, they are not very clear because there are so many ways to be happy, to love, to make friends. With the images shown here, think about it this way. If I wanted to employ animators to make the images portray happiness, love, friendship, satisfaction, etc., how would they know what I want them to draw? They would not. They would need a lot more detail. In fact, the level of detail required to create a scene that reflects these terms is quite phenomenal. But it would not be impossible, as any animated movie shows us. With enough detail, animators would be able to draw exactly the action or the feeling that would make the animated character appear to express these feelings. This level of detail does not detract from the animation. In fact, the character only comes to life when this detail is provided. The same precision and focus is what is required by a science concerned with understanding the origins of experiences and the consequences of experiences. The main problem is that our everyday language is incredibly imprecise. Often we use words that are best considered as summary labels, terms that summarize a whole host of things that my daughter had to learn and do. These terms don't explain how come she is able to do them. They just sum up what she does. Take the summary label happiness and ask yourself, how do you know that she is happy? The answer to this question is difficult but not impossible. First of all, we can see what she does. For example, we can see her smile, laugh, relax, and so forth. If she does all of these things quite often, we could use the term happiness to label this group of behaviors. Oh, and before I forget, my use of the word behavior is very different from its everyday use. As a behavior analyst, I use the word behavior to refer to anything a person does, and that includes thinking and feeling, for these are also things we do. We do think and we do feel. Of course, there are many things Sarah does that we cannot observe from the outside, but she can observe them. She knows when she's feeling in a particular way, knows when she's thinking a particular way, and she's aware in a particular way. Mind you, she had to learn these skills as well, but that is another story in itself. Anyway, back to where I was. All of these private behaviors can be grouped under the summary label, such as happiness, for example. How about the summary label of helpful or empathetic? There are lots of behaviors that fit in here, like talking to others in need, noticing when someone is in need, or engaging in practical, useful skills. Or how about clever and intelligent? Again, a host of behaviors are necessary before somebody can use these summary labels appropriately. She is clever because she responds appropriately to difficult questions or behaves accordingly in difficult situations. As soon as you see how language uses terms to group behaviors, then other issues inevitably arise. The most obvious one is which behaviors to include in which group. And you can only group behaviors when you see them. Not very surprising there. But there is a tremendously subtle but important point being made when I say that. Bit by bit, behavior by behavior, the scientist in me can clearly define each behavior in a way that can be observed. And to help verify my decisions, it is useful to involve other observers. When two or more observers agree on whether a behavior has occurred or not, it is called inter-observer agreement. If there was no inter-observer agreement, the animators would be confused in deciding which behaviors they must draw. Of course, it is also important to decide what dimension to use when measuring the behavior. For example, every behavior has a certain frequency. Take smiles, for example. If a person only smiles once or twice, it would not be enough to say that she is happy. If she smiles frequently enough, then the summary label happiness would be more appropriate. In other words, the finished product of the animator's work incorporates frequency measures so that the viewing audience can be persuaded that a particular emotion is being portrayed. Behaviors also happen for a certain duration, say for example, looking at someone, having eye contact. Very short and it's a glance, too long and it's a stare. Of course, there are cultural differences, but generally speaking, you engage in various durations of eye contact in different contexts. If these durations were exaggerated by being either too short or too long, then eye contact might be reclassified as being inappropriate. The introduction to a stranger requires a relatively brief glance, while a deep and meaningful conversation with a friend requires longer eye contact, and the kiss of a lover requires no eye contact at all, as your eyes are probably closed. Once we know the frequency or duration of a behavior, we can start making adjustments if someone needs help. Too high a frequency or too long a duration means that there is an excess, too much of behavior. Too small a frequency or too short a duration, and we have a behavioral deficit, not enough of a behavior. Once we understand behavior like this, then the scientist is in a position to help rebalance excesses or deficits for people who experience problems because of them. If someone is happy the way they are and they are not asking for help, then of course that's fine. No one should pressure them to engage in an intervention simply because they might be different. Indeed, that would only provoke an argument because it would infringe on the rights of an individual to be different. Nevertheless, the consequences of behavioral excesses or deficits can disadvantage a person. If this happens, it would make sense for them to consider whether they have the skill of being able to make a choice between changing or not changing the way they behave. In summary, like the animator whose craft is reliant on being able to fine-tune the various dimensions of behavior when creating a character in a scene, the parent and the scientist are also sensitive to the needs of a child so that the child is not disadvantaged by the behaviours she may bring to a situation. Okay, now that that's cleared up, let us look at the reason why it is so important to understand how to view behaviour as a scientist. You may think that really most parents know what to do and usually do the right thing when teaching their kids some new behaviour, such as potty training or speaking their own language. Well, of course that's true. That does not take away from the fact that these parents use the same behavioral principles intuitively that I can recognize as a scientist. The difference is that usually they don't know what behavioral principles they are using, and when things go wrong, they don't know what to do. However, if parents understood the language of a science used in the analysis of behavior, they would be empowered to deal with many issues before they grow into problems. On the other hand, when there are problems and we have to make up lost ground, knowledge of science of behavior allows for differentiated and individually tailored interventions. For example, there may be serious functional skills deficits that require particular interventions to help someone learn those behaviors, like being able to make lots of friends and so forth. Like an animator, the scientist learns how to address the oftentimes vagueness of ordinary language by breaking down summary labels into small, achievable aims or target behaviors. Each target behavior then is taught using carefully designed strategies that meet the needs of the individual, a need that is assessed in a meticulous way. If need be, then carefully selected learning exercises are repeated until they are mastered. Once one behavior is learned, the next behavior builds on that until a complex web of behaviors is now part of the person's repertoire. Throughout all of this work, it would be wrong to suggest that as a parent or as a behavior analyst, I don't accept my child, or any other child for that matter, as they are. Rather, it means that I'm aware of the skills they need in life, and that my dedication and my science together provide an opportunity to help them get there. Of course, understanding all this does not mean that I don't consider biological or neurological factors and physiological differences between my own children or other people's children. Clearly, these differences are important in any analysis of behavior, mainly because they are not simply a given. They too depend on environmental influences, like parental inputs such as nutrition, exercise, rest, shelter, etc. Throughout all of this, the fact that as a scientist I can analyze what parents do does not mean that my own parenting is done without love. On the contrary, paying detailed attention to my child's behavior and making sure that her environment supports her development is the ultimate expression of love. From the perspective of a mother, I can glance lovingly at my girl and hope and wish and dream. As a scientist, I can appreciate how the laws of learning can be harnessed to make sure that she learns all the behavior she needs to fulfill her dreams and aspirations. As Greg S. Reid said, a dream written down with a date becomes a goal broken down into steps becomes a plan backed by action makes your dreams come true.